The quiet girl in the back, first time Keanu saw Sydney. She was sitting on a wooden bench outside the small art center on 3rd Street. It was a gray Tuesday, and the sky looked like it hadn't smiled in weeks. She wore a pale blue hoodie, sleeves pulled over her hands, her head slightly down. People passed her by without a glance. No one stopped. No one noticed. But Keanu did. He always noticed the ones who looked like they were hiding in plain sight, maybe because he had been one of them for most of his life. He didn't say anything. That day, he just walked by slowly, glanced at her once and kept moving, but something about her stayed with him. The way her shoulders were folded in, the way she held her phone like she was waiting for a call that would never come. There was a stillness in her that didn't feel peaceful. It felt heavy, like she was carrying something she didn't know how to put down. Keanu came back the next day and the day after that. Not because he was curious, not even because he wanted to talk. He came because he understood that sometimes the presence of someone kind of a stranger could feel like light cracking through a closed window. He sat on a bench across from hers, never directly next to her, always giving her space. Always. Silent on the 4th day, she looked up. Her eyes met his for a second, and then quickly dropped. It was enough. Start, like a door opening just slightly. Keanu smiled, gentle and quiet, then looked away. He didn't push. He never did. He had learned long ago that the most fragile people needed time. They needed patience more than advice, and silence more than noise. Sydney didn't know why the man across from her kept coming back. He wasn't dressed like anyone famous. No sunglasses, no loud voice, just a black jacket, soft jeans, and calm eyes. The kind of eyes that didn't try to figure you out. They just saw you. She wasn't used to that. People usually wanted something. They wanted to fix her, or tell her what she was doing wrong, or ask questions she wasn't ready to answer. What no one knew was that Sydney had walked away from everything 3 weeks ago. Her agency, her phone calls, her scripts, her friends. It wasn't that she hated it all. She just felt like she was disappearing inside it. Like she had become a version of herself that smiled on cue, laughed when expected, and said all the right words without feeling a single one of them. She was tired of being looked at without being seen. That bench became her safe place. It's not because it was special, not because it was beautiful, but because no one there expected her to perform. And now, with the quiet man who sat across from her, it felt like she wasn't alone anymore. Even though they hadn't spoken a single word. On the 7th day, he brought 2 coffees. He set one beside her without looking at her and sat back. Down on his bench, it was warm. She stared at the cup for a long time. Her fingers itched to reach out, but her thoughts wrestled with doubt. What if it meant something more? What if accepting kindness opened doors she wasn't ready to walk through? But her hands moved anyway. She lifted the cup. And for the first time in weeks, she took a sip of something that wasn't fear. The warmth spread through her chest. It wasn't just the coffee. It was the gesture. Small, silent, sincere. She glanced up. He was reading a paperback novel. The cover was old and faded. He wasn't watching her. He had given without expectation, and that broke something soft inside her. Sydney looked around. The world was still rushing. People still passed by. But she felt different now. Like she had an anchor. Like her invisibility had been gently erased by someone who didn't need anything from her. Someone who didn't try to explain her sadness or give it a name. That night, she went home and opened her journal. She hadn't written in weeks. Her pen felt heavy in her hand. But the words came anyway. Today someone saw me. And it didn't hurt. The next morning, she arrived early. The man was already there. Same seat, same calm. He nodded when she sat down. No words, just a nod. And somehow that felt like a conversation. She noticed things about him now. The way he tapped his finger lightly against his book when he was deep in thought. The way his eyes scanned the trees before he started reading. Like he was checking to make sure the world was still holding on. "You always come here?" asked, voice small. Keanu looked up, a quiet smile blooming across his face. "Not always," he said. "Just when someone needs me to." She didn't know what that meant, but she didn't ask. She nodded, mimicking his softness. For the first time in years, Sydney didn't feel the urge to explain herself. She didn't feel the need to apologize for her quiet or dress up her pain. She just existed. And he let her later that week, as the sun dipped low and the streetlights began their quiet hum. She sat beside him instead of across. Their shoulders didn't touch, but the space between them felt different now. Not like distance, more like peace. "You don't know me," she whispered. "I don't need to," Keanu replied. "I see you." Those 3 words. They cracked. Something wide open in her. She turned her face away, but not before a tear slid down her cheek. It wasn't sadness, it was relief. Deep, unexpected relief. Like someone had taken the weight from her chest without asking for anything in return. She leaned back and closed her eyes. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel lost. Not because she had found all the answers, but because someone had shown her it was okay to not have them yet. Keanu didn't move. He just sat beside her, letting silence do what words never could. In that stillness, something powerful grew, something unspoken, something kind, and in that moment, under the streetlight, with no camera in sight, no fans, no scripts, no pressure, just 2 souls breathing in the same space, Sydney felt something she hadn't felt in years, felt seen. What silence remembers days blurred into each other, like brushstrokes on a canvas no one could name. Sydney kept coming to the bench. So did Keanu. They didn't talk much, sometimes not at all. And yet the quiet between them said everything. It wasn't awkward. It wasn't cold. It was the kind of silence that felt like home. Safe, soft, strong enough to hold pain without breaking. Sydney began to notice things she used to ignore. The way the wind tugged at the leaves above them. The way children laughed in the distance. Like they had never known disappointment. The smell of street food rolling from the corner cart. It was like life had always been happening, but she had been too far inside herself to feel it. Now, sitting beside Keanu, she started feeling again. Not all at once, not loudly, just enough to remind her she was still human. One morning, she came in late. Her eyes were red, her hair unbrushed. She sat down and wrapped her arms around herself, like she was holding pieces together. Keanu looked at her. He didn't ask what was wrong. Simply placed a small paper bag next to her and turned back to his book. Inside, the bag was a chocolate croissant. Warm, soft, it smelled like kindness. Sydney didn't speak for a long time. But when she finally bit into it, she broke. Her shoulders shook. Tears slipped quietly down her cheeks, and still, Keanu said nothing, didn't offer tissue, didn't pat her back. He just let her feel. Because sometimes kindness wasn't fixing, it was simply staying. She spoke later that afternoon, voice hoarse, almost ashamed. "I went back yesterday, ... to my place, ... to the studio. Everything felt fake." Keanu nodded gently, eyes still. "On the ground. Sometimes the world demands a version of us that feels like a costume," he said. "And sometimes we forget how to take it off." She looked at him then, really looked. "Is that why you're here? Because you took yours off too?" His eyes met hers, honest and still. "I never wore one," he whispered. "But I watched people I loved disappear inside theirs." It was the first time he'd mentioned anything close to personal. And it hung in the air between them like something holy. Sydney didn't press. She just let the words settle. They started talking more after that. Not about everything. Just pieces. Soft pieces. Sydney told him about her mother. How she always smiled but never looked happy. How she taught her how to pose before she taught her how to cry. How fame came faster than love ever did. And how somehow she had learned to hide her true self in every room, afraid that being real would disappoint everyone. Keanu listened. Really listened. Not like a man waiting to speak. Not like a guide trying to lead. Just a presence. Patient. Strong, quiet. He never said things like, "It'll be okay." He never told her to be grateful or tough or positive. He just held the space. And in doing so, gave her something no one else had permission to be exactly as she was. One rainy afternoon, They sat under the awning of a bookstore nearby. The bench was soaked, the air sharp with the scent of wet pavement. Sydney held her, knees closed, chin resting on them, watching the rain like it had answers. I used to think if people loved me enough, the emptiness would stop, she said. Keanu waited. But now I think I was looking for the wrong kind of love. He turned to her slowly. What kind were you looking for? The kind that claps when I speak. The kind that posts about me. The kind that shows up only when I shine. Keanu looked into the distance. Those aren't love, he said. Those are reflections. Real love is blind to the spotlight. It sits with you in the dark. She smiled through her sadness. You sound like a monk, he chuckled lightly. Maybe I'm just old. No, she said. You're just real, and that's rare. They both went quiet again, listening to the rain, letting it fill in the spaces their voices couldn't in. The following days, something began to shift. Sydney started wearing lighter colors. Her hood stayed down. She laughed, sometimes quiet and brief, but real. She still carried shadows, but they no longer owned her. They walked beside her like memories, not prisons. She asked Keanu about his past one morning as they watched a dog chase birds across the sidewalk. You never talk about you. I don't need to, he said. Why not? Because this. Right here, ... This isn't about me. She tilted her head. What is it about then? He smiled, a little sad, a little kind. It's about showing up when someone thinks no one will. His words wrapped around her heart like a blanket, soft, honest, warm. She touched his hand just briefly. Thank you for showing up, he nodded. Looking ahead, you're not lost, Sydney, he said. You're just learning how to walk without pretending. That night, Sydney went home and turned her phone back on. Not to post, not to scroll, just to read the messages she'd been avoiding. Most of them were from people who missed her smile, but never asked how her heart was doing. She didn't reply. Not yet. But she felt different now. Stronger, softer, more real. She stood in front of her mirror and looked at her reflection. 4. The first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she had to perform. She didn't fix her hair, didn't tilt her head, just looked and smiled, because someone had seen her when she couldn't see herself. And now, piece by piece, she was learning how to live again, not for the world, but for herself. Shadows in the spotlight. Sydney didn't expect to return to acting. Not so soon, not after everything. But one afternoon, while sitting beside Keanu under their usual tree, she got a call from a director she deeply respected. He said he wasn't calling about a job, he just wanted to know if she was okay. His voice didn't carry pressure, just care. She didn't say much, but something inside her shifted. For the first time in a long time, she felt like maybe she could work again. Not to prove anything, not to run from herself, but to explore who she really was. When she told Keanu, he didn't react with excitement or advice. He just nodded slowly and said, "Only go back if your heart wants to whisper, not scream." She didn't fully understand what he meant, but she felt it. Acting had always been loud for her, loud with expectations, loud with approval, loud and with image. But maybe now, maybe she could be quiet and real inside her work. Maybe she could make it hers again. A few days later, Sydney agreed to read a script. She read it while sitting in the same spot where Keanu had first left that coffee. Beside her, the pages felt different now. She didn't imagine the camera. She imagined the truth. The story was simple. A woman trying to reconnect with her estranged father after losing her child. The role was raw, messy, painful, and something about. It felt deeply familiar. When she told Keanu she was considering it, he asked just one question. Would you do it if no one ever clapped? She paused, then nodded. Double quotes, then do it, he said softly. Sydney took the part. The first day on set felt strange. Like walking into a house she once lived in but barely remembered. Everything was familiar. The lights, the buzz, the waiting, but she was different now, quieter inside, more grounded, less interested in being impressive, more curious about being honest. The crew noticed it, not in a loud way, just little things. She greeted everyone with real warmth. She asked about their families. She didn't rush to her trailer between takes. She sat in the open, breathed, listened. Keanu visited once, not during filming, just after hours. She found him waiting outside the studio, sitting on a low wall with 2 paper cups in hand. "Figured you might be too tired to talk," he said, "but not too tired for tea." She laughed gently and took the cup. "You were right," she said, "about the whisper. How does it feel?" "Honest," she whispered. "Feels like I'm not pretending anymore." He nodded, that soft, approving nod she'd come to treasure. "Then you're finally acting," he said. The days moved slowly, but her heart moved faster. Scenes that once would have drained her now made her feel alive. Yet she wasn't playing emotions. She was feeling them. Even when the tears came, they weren't rehearsed. They came from the place she had hidden all those years, a place Keanu had helped her unlock. But not everyone around her understood the change. One afternoon, the producer pulled her aside. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Doing great," he said, "but you single quotes read ... different. Less sparkly. Maybe throw in a little more of that old Sydney charm, huh?" The words hit her like cold wind. She nodded politely, but inside something cracked. That night, she didn't go to the bench. She went straight home. Curled up on the floor with a blanket and stared at the ceiling for hours. Old voices came crawling back. "You're too dull now. You used to shine. They want the version that smiles." Why did you change it next morning?" She didn't want to get up. Her chest felt heavy, her limbs slow. She reached for her phone, thought of canceling the shoot, then paused. Instead, she messaged Keanu. "Can we meet?" He was already at the bench when she arrived. No book this time. Just him, waiting. "Messed up," she said, sitting down hard beside him. "What happened?" "I stopped being what they wanted, and now I feel like I'm breaking everything." Keanu didn't speak right away. He waited for the wind to settle. "You're not breaking anything," he said finally. "You're just not shrinking anymore." She looked at him, tears close. But what if they stop calling?
What if no one wants this version of me?
He looked straight into her eyes, then let them go, he said. "The people who only want your smile don't deserve your truth." Her breath caught. No one had ever said that to her, not once. And hearing it now felt like being given permission to breathe fully for the first time. She nodded, slow but firm. "Thank you," she whispered. He smiled gently. "Don't thank me. You did this. You showed up for your own life." That day, on set, she was different. Not in performance, but in presence. She didn't adjust herself to meet expectations. She held steady, quiet, strong, the director noticed. So did her co-star. At this time, even if no one clapped, she knew what she gave was real. Later that evening, she brought Keanu a journal. Small, leather-bound, blank pages. "I figured it's your turn," she said. "My turn. To write, or to feel, or to heal. Whatever you've been hiding behind all that calm." He looked at the journal like it was made of something sacred. "You're braver than you know," he said. "You showed me how," she replied. They sat together until the streetlights blinked on. No words, no need. The silence was full again. Full of growth, of memory, of hope, and Sydney's smile. Real, soft, honest. Because even in the world of bright lights and heavy cameras, someone had taught her how to walk through it without losing her light. Breaking the Mirror movie wrapped quietly. No press tour, no party. Just handshakes, hugs, and the kind of silence that meant something sacred had been completed. Sydney stood alone on the empty set one last time. Didn't feel like an end. It felt like a beginning, like a version of herself had been buried in the final take, and something new had taken its place. She wasn't sure who this new version was yet, but she liked her more. She was softer, but not fragile. Louder in her honesty, but quieter in her fear. Keanu had disappeared for a few days after the rap he didn't explain. He didn't say goodbye. He just vanished like he had always known when to step back. Sydney missed him more than she expected. not just because of what he had given her, but because of what she hadn't yet given him her full story. She wanted to tell him everything now. The parts she'd skipped, the memories she kept buried like a wound that never healed. Because even though he never asked, he had earned the truth. When he returned, it was evening. She found him sitting at their usual bench, staring up at the sky like he was reading stories in the clouds. "You were gone," she said, standing beside him. "I was listening," he replied. "To what?" "Myself." She sat down slowly, heart heavier than it had been in weeks. "Can I tell you something real?" she asked. He turned his head, gave her that gentle look he always gave, before letting the world fall silent. "Of course." God took a deep breath. Her fingers trembled slightly in her lap. "I was 13 when I first realized I could cry on command," she began. "My dad had just left. My mom was trying to hold everything together. I didn't know how to help, so I started acting like I was okay, and when that worked, people praised me for being strong, ... I kept doing it." Keanu didn't interrupt. His eyes stayed soft, patient. "By the time I turned 16, I didn't know who I was anymore. I'd smile in interviews and cry in hotel rooms. I'd laugh on camera and break down in bathrooms. And then, when I finally told someone I wasn't okay, ... they said I was being dramatic." Her voice cracked. She swallowed hard. "So I stopped saying it." Stopped. Tears streamed freely now, not because she was performing, but because the weight was finally too heavy to carry alone. "And that's why I left. That's why you found me on that bench. I didn't run from fame. I ran from a version of myself. I couldn't breathe inside." Keanu's voice was soft when it finally came. "And now I don't want to run anymore," she said. "But I'm scared because what if the real me ... isn't enough?" He looked at her with a quiet kind of fire in his eyes. "Sydney," he said slowly, "you are not a mirror made to reflect what others want to see. You are a window clear, open, alive. And even when the world forgets how to look through it, you still let the light in." She broke again, not from sadness, but from the sudden, overwhelming peace of being understood. They sat in silence, head resting gently against his shoulder. The world passing by without asking anything of them. In that small space between breaths, she felt whole again. The next day, Sydney did something she hadn't done in years. She called her mother, not because she was ready to fix everything, but because she wanted to try. The conversation was messy. It was full of long pauses, tears, and old wounds. But it was real, and when she hung up, she didn't feel broken. She felt brave. She told Keanu about the call. "She said she missed me," Sydney whispered. "And then she said she didn't know how to love me without managing me." "That's a painful truth," Keanu said gently. "Yeah, but it's also honest. And honesty is a doorway. Maybe someday you both walk through it." Sydney smiled, a little tired, but a little taller. She started writing again, too, not scripts, not speeches, just thoughts, memories, dreams. Late at night, she'd fill page after page in the journal Keanu once told her to keep. She didn't share them. She didn't post them. She just wrote them because they were hers. Then one evening, something happened. As she walked home from a quiet dinner, a fan spotted her. Young girl, maybe 16. Wide eyes, shaking voice. "Are you Sydney Sweeney?" Sydney stopped, smiled. Gently, double quotes, "Yeah." "Hi." The girl hesitated, and suddenly tears. "She saved me," she whispered. "When you disappeared, I thought you were gone forever. But then ... I saw your eyes again in that new film. I knew you were still there." Sydney didn't speak. She just pulled the girl into a hug. Tight, real, kind after the girl left. Sydney stood under the streetlight, frozen. She had been seen, truly seen, not as a product, not as a brand, but as a person who had walked through darkness and come out with her heart still open. Later that night, she told Keanu everything. He listened quietly, then said, "Your story is a bridge. You never know who's waiting on the other side." "What if I mess up again?" she asked. Then you fall, he said, and then you get back up, because that's what humans do. She looked at him. You've saved me more than once. No, he said gently. I just reminded you who you were. Sydney leaned into him, letting the silence hold them both. In that moment, she realized something. She had been afraid of losing herself for so long she'd never imagined what it might feel like to truly find herself. And now that she had, the world didn't feel so heavy. It felt possible. When the lights came back, Aunt's first interview offer came 2 weeks later. A big magazine, glossy cover, full spread. They said they wanted to talk about her disappearance and comeback. She almost said no. Keanu told her something. That stuck. Silence can be powerful, he said. But sometimes, truth spoken aloud heals more than it hurts. So she agreed, but only under one condition. No pre-approved questions, no handlers, no filters, just her and the truth. When the interview day came, she wore no makeup. She sat across from the journalist with steady eyes and an open heart. And when they asked, "Where did you go?" she didn't flinch. I didn't go anywhere, she said softly. I just stopped pretending. The room fell quiet, and then she spoke about everything. The pressure, the performance. The nights she cried on marble floors with a smile still painted on her face. The mornings she forgot who she was. The fear of disappointing fans. The guilt of wanting to leave it all behind. And then she talked about the bench. There was a man, she said. Not famous, not loud, just kind. He didn't ask for anything. He didn't try to fix me. He just saw me. And in that silence, I began to find myself again. The article went viral. Not because it was dramatic, not because it was perfect, but because it was people. Didn't just read it, they felt it. Messages flooded in. Stories from strangers who had also vanished quietly from their own lives, hoping someone might notice. The world that once demanded her to sparkle now leaned in to listen to her truth. Keanu didn't say much when she told him how the article was received. He just smiled like a proud older brother, hands folded in his lap. Truth has its own kind of light, he said. But with light came shadows. One afternoon, her old manager reached out. Charming voice, sweet tone, full of concern. You've got the world's attention again, Sid, he said. This is the moment. Commercials, brand deals, 3 scripts waiting. We can ride this wave. She froze. There. It was again the voice that used to shape her every move. The promise of more eyes, more praise, more stage. But Sydney wasn't the same girl anymore. I'm not interested in riding waves, she said. I'm learning to swim. He laughed politely, but the silence after said everything. That night, she sat beside Keanu and asked him a question she'd never dared before. How did you stay true to yourself all these years? He looked out at the passing cars, lights. Blinking in the dusk, by losing things, he said. Faye, people, offers, it hurt. But the more I lost, the more I found what mattered. She nodded slowly. And what mattered most? He turned to her. Peace. Sydney closed her eyes, breathing it in. In the weeks that followed, she made new choices. She took roles that made her feel something, not just roles that paid more. She partnered with mental health groups, visited schools, sat quietly with girls, who reminded her of herself, not as a celebrity, but as a survivor. A human. A soul. One afternoon, during a school visit, a teacher pulled her aside. They listened to you, the teacher said. Not because you're famous, but because you're honest. The words settled deep inside her. They weren't applause. They weren't headlines. But they meant more than all of it. Keanu, meanwhile, had started writing in the journal she gave him. Not every day, just when his thoughts felt too heavy for silence. He never shared what he wrote, and she never asked. But one evening, as they sat on the bench with orange light painting the trees, he handed her a page. Read it? She asked. If you want to, he replied. The page said this. I once believed my quiet made me invisible, but I've learned. Now it's in quiet that we're truly seen, because only those who look with their hearts notice the ones who aren't asking to be noticed. She folded the page gently and held it to her chest. "You're more than you let people see." She whispered, "So are you," he replied. That night, something shifted. Not between them, but inside them. Their bond had always been soft, wordless, strong. But now it felt unshakable. Like two trees growing beside each other, roots quietly tangled beneath the soil. The next morning, Sydney looked in the mirror again. Not to fix anything, not to measure, just to look. And what she saw wasn't a product or a headline or a brand. She saw a girl who had once gotten lost trying to be everything, and now finally, ... She was just herself, and that was enough. The quiet becomes a voice man's past. The bench, once a place of escape, had become something sacred. They never spoke about. The attention just kept showing up like they always had. Like the world outside didn't change the meaning of that small space between them. One day, Keanu didn't come. Sydney waited. First 5 minutes, then 20, then an hour. She didn't panic, not at first. But as the sky changed colors, her chest grew tight. She messaged him. No reply. She checked the bookstore, the park path, the cafe nearby. Nothing. It wasn't like him. That night, she couldn't sleep. The next morning, he still hadn't responded, so she went searching. It took 2 days. On the third day, she found him. Not at the bench. Not in the quiet spots they shared. He was sitting outside a hospital, back leaned against a brick wall, looking smaller than she had ever seen him. "Keanu?" she asked, rushing toward him. He looked up, smiled softly. But it wasn't the same smile. It was tired, worn, sad. "My sister's sick," he said quietly. "I've been here with her." Sydney dropped beside him, breath caught in her throat. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't want to pull you back into the dark," he whispered. "You've come so far." She touched his hand, firm and steady. "But you were the one who taught me not to run from pain," she said. "Let me sit in yours now." So they sat for the first time, the roles reversed. Sydney became the presence, the anchor, the calm. She brought tea every day. She read books beside him while he waited. She sat in silence when he couldn't speak. And in that soft exchange of care, their bond grew even deeper. His sister passed 2 weeks later, peacefully, gently, with Keanu holding her hand. After the funeral, he disappeared again for a day. Then one morning, he showed up at the bench. Sydney was already there, waiting. He sat beside her, and for the first time he cried, not the quiet tears she knew. These were deep, raw, years of loss spilling out in a single afternoon. She held him and said nothing, because she knew. Sometimes love wasn't advice. Sometimes love was just staying when someone was breaking. In the months that followed, they both healed. Slowly, quietly, like old scars learning to soften. Sydney's quotes career took a different path. Not bigger, just better. She chose roles that made her feel something. She directed a short film based on her journal entries. It wasn't flashy, but it made people cry for the right reasons. She got letters from girls who said things like, "I thought I was invisible until I saw you. You helped me feel seen in my sadness. Thank you for being real and in every word." She saw her younger self and smiled one evening under soft golden light. Sydney asked Keanu the question that had lived inside her for so long. "Why did you choose to sit across from me that day?" He looked at her for a long time, then said, "Because I knew what it felt like to sit alone and hope someone would notice." She nodded, eyes glassy. "And now," he whispered, "I sit beside someone who no longer needs saving but chooses to be present anyway." They didn't need labels, they didn't need titles. What they had was deeper. A friendship forged in silence, a bond born from presence, a love made of truth, not romance. Not expectation, just soul-level carriers. Past the bench stayed the same, but they both changed and beautiful. Quiet Wason day. A young girl sat where Sydney once did, hoodie pulled over her head, shoulders folded in, eyes down Sydney. And Keanu passed by. They looked at each other. No words need thee. Both sat down nearby, not close, not far, just close enough to say with silence, "We see you," and Maybe, just maybe, that's how it all begins. Agenbeck. Sometimes the most powerful thing in the world is not being rescued, but being seen and staying long enough for someone else to see themselves too.